insider technique to exam questions, top 3 ways to answer exam questions. First major thing that students need to know about exams is command words. They need to understand command words. As I said, I did an in-depth training with my students on my program recently, and it became apparent that 2 of the most common command words, describe and explain, several of the students were getting it mixed up, right? And that is it right there. It shows you why students are not doing very well, because they don't understand the question. And the example that slash analogy that I use here, if you've seen some of my recent posts around this, is to do with interview. It's to do with interview techniques, right? So imagine, going to a top university, being extremely qualified, doing really well, getting a first class, but you can't get a job. You go to interviews and you are unable to get a job. Now, a lot of the time that can just be due to you're not answering the question in the way the examiner wants you to answer it, right? So you don't know exactly what they're saying to you. And I talked about a friend of mine who was in the same position, was not getting job, saying all of these things to himself as to why not. And then once I told him to identify the questions, to write down the questions and how he was answering it, I then spotted out that, oh, you're answering it incorrectly, right? So that's where, just right there, let me just share this again, right there, that is the problem. It's basically not knowing what the question is asking and therefore not knowing how to answer it, even if your knowledge is there, okay? So it's command words. So now, many of you may have heard of command words, but it's just a word that tells the students what they need to do, how they need to answer the question. You need to calculate, not explain, calculate. You need to describe, not identify or evaluate. You need to describe. It's a specific action word that tells them what to do. And as I said, the biggest one, the one that is most common is describe and explain. And it's the biggest one, interestingly, that I see students get tripped over. But that's the one that's most common, so they need to know it. Describe is a lot easier, well, simpler, right, than explaining. When you're describing something, you're simply just stating whatever that question is about, whether it's a diagram or a graph or whatever. You're just stating the general thing, like describe that tree. What does that tree look like? It's massive, it has a massive trunk, and so on and so forth. When they are explaining, that's where they need to go further and starting to give reasons why. And many times, for some reason, students can mix up both of those, but describe is literally just a very short sentence, whereas explain is a little bit more than that, okay?